The Santa Claus Incineration. On December 24, 2008, the suburban community of Covina, California gathered for traditional Christmas Eve celebration. Families exchanged gifts and children anticipated Santa's arrival. At one home on Knollcrest Drive, a family hosted their annual holiday party. Among the expected guests was a man dressed as Santa Claus. At approximately 11:30 p.m., a figure dressed in a full Santa Claus costume appeared at the front door, carrying what looked like a large wrapped gift. Inside were 9 people, including his ex-wife. When a girl ran to greet Santa, he raised a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and shot her in the face. She survived, but what followed was methodical slaughter. He stepped inside and began firing at the partygoers. The sound of gunshots was partially masked by Christmas music playing through the house. He moved room to room with calculated precision, shooting his victims at close range. Those who tried to flee were hunted down and executed, but the gunfire was only the beginning. The package he carried contained a homemade pressurized device filled with racing fuel. After the shooting, he unwrapped it and sprayed the flammable liquid throughout the home. The racing fuel ignited instantly. Temperatures reached over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit within seconds. The house became an inferno. Victims who had survived the gunshots now faced a more agonizing death. Forensic reports later revealed that at least 3 victims were still alive when the fire started. Smoke inhalation and thermal burns became the final cause of death. The fire spread so rapidly that escape was impossible. The home's Christmas decorations accelerated the blaze. First responders arrived to find the structure fully engulfed. The heat was so intense they couldn't approach. Inside, 9 people perished in the flames. The bodies were burned beyond recognition. Medical examiners later required dental records for identification. Some victims were found huddled together, having died trying to shield each other from the inferno. After setting the home on fire, he changed out of the Santa suit and drove to his brother's house in Sylmar, where he was later found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the mouth at around 3 a.m. The Sudden Family Massacre. On Christmas morning, December 25, 1929, the rural community of Germantown, North Carolina awoke to celebrate the holiday. Among them was a farming family, respected tobacco farmers known for their hard work and seeming normalcy. The 43-year-old patriarch had recently taken his family to town for new clothes and a portrait, an unusual expense for a farming family during the Depression. At approximately 1 p.m., the father called his oldest son, sending him on an errand to purchase ammunition in town. This deliberate act would save his life. With his oldest son gone, the father began an organized sequence of violence that shocked the nation. He first encountered his daughter as she prepared Christmas dinner. He raised his 12-gauge shotgun and fired at point-blank range into the back of her head. The blast was devastating, killing her instantly. The sound echoed through the farmhouse. His wife heard the shot and ran toward the noise. He met her in the doorway and fired directly into her face. She collapsed without making a sound. Next came the boys and girls. He hunted them methodically through the house. 2 daughters attempted to hide, but were discovered cowering in the tobacco barn. Both were killed with single shots to the head. The 2 boys tried to escape by running across the yard. He pursued them, his shotgun empty. He caught them near the woodpile. Switching tactics, he bludgeoned both boys with the wooden stock of his gun. The force was so severe it fractured their skulls in multiple places. After killing his entire family, he carefully arranged each body. He crossed their arms over their chests and placed rocks under their heads as makeshift pillows. The bodies were positioned as if prepared for burial. He then walked into the nearby woods, sat against a tree, and fired a single shot through his own temple. Execution of a Dictator. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1989, Romania was in the final throes of violent revolution. For 24 years, a dictator had ruled the country with absolute authority. His Securitate secret police had tortured thousands. His economic policies had left millions starving in the dark. Just days earlier, he had ordered troops to fire on protesters in Timișoara, killing dozens of civilians. Now, the 71-year-old dictator and his wife were fugitives. They had fled Bucharest by helicopter on December 22nd as crowds stormed the Communist Party headquarters. Their pilot, claiming mechanical problems, landed in a field. The couple were captured while attempting to hitchhike. At 2:30 p.m. on Christmas Day, they were brought to a military base in Târgoviște. Inside a small classroom, a hastily assembled military tribunal awaited. The trial lasted less than an hour. No evidence was formally presented. No witnesses were called. They refused to recognize the court's authority. "I am the president of Romania," the dictator shouted repeatedly. His wife, known for her own cruelty as deputy prime minister, spat at the judges. Both denied all charges of genocide, claiming the tribunal itself was a foreign conspiracy. At 2:45 p.m., the verdict was announced: death by firing squad. The execution was to be carried out immediately. They were led outside into the winter cold. The dictator began singing the International, the communist anthem. His wife screamed curses at the soldiers. Their hands were bound behind their backs with rough rope that cut into their skin. They were positioned against a wall. No blindfolds were offered. 3 soldiers with AK-47 rifles took position 10 meters away. "We want to die together," the dictator said, his final words. The order to fire came at 2:50 p.m. The soldiers discharged over 120 rounds. The first bullet struck him in the chest. He fell forward, still alive for several seconds, before a shot to the head ended his life. His wife was hit simultaneously, her body collapsing beside her husband's. A military doctor confirmed death at 2:55 p.m. The entire execution was filmed. The footage later broadcast to a jubilant nation. The poisoned Christmas pudding. On December 26, 1927, a wealthy family gathered at their Montreal estate for their annual Boxing Day celebration. The day after Christmas was traditionally when the family exchanged their most lavish gifts and enjoyed an elaborate feast prepared by their household staff. 23 family members attended, including one of the grandchildren. The holiday meal proceeded normally through several courses. At approximately 3:45 p.m., the family's prized Christmas pudding was brought out. The dessert was a family tradition made from a recipe passed down for generations. The dark, dense cake glistened with brandy sauce as it was ceremoniously carried to the table. The boy was the most eager for dessert. He was served one of the first portions. Within 20 minutes of consuming the pudding, he began to show signs of distress. His first complaints were of a burning sensation in his throat and stomach. His mother initially dismissed it as excitement. By 4:30 p.m., he was in severe pain. He began vomiting violently. The vomitus had a distinctive garlic-like odor, a detail that would later become crucial to investigators. Around the table, other family members began experiencing similar symptoms, though none as severe as his. The family physician was called from his own holiday gathering. He arrived at 5:15 p.m. to find the boy convulsing. His lips had turned blue. His pulse was rapid and weak. The doctor immediately suspected poisoning and administered activated charcoal, but it was too late. His condition deteriorated rapidly. His kidneys were failing. His liver was shutting down. Blood began appearing in his vomit and stool, signs of internal hemorrhaging. His small body, racked with pain, fought for 7 agonizing hours. At 11:42 p.m., the boy died in his mother's arms. An autopsy revealed the cause: arsenic trioxide. The concentration in the Christmas pudding was later determined to be nearly 20 times the lethal dose. 12 other family members were hospitalized but survived. Police investigation revealed the poison had been added after the pudding was cooked, likely during preparation for serving. Despite a thorough investigation, no one was ever charged. The poisoner's identity remains unknown to this day. A gifted snowmobile tragedy. On Christmas morning, December 25, 1974, the small town of Crum, North Dakota, was covered in a fresh blanket of snow. For a boy, it was the perfect setting for what would become his first and final ride on a new snowmobile. His parents had saved for months to purchase the Arctic Cat Lynx 292 as their son's main Christmas present. At 10:15 a.m., he unwrapped the keys to the machine. His father had already positioned the snowmobile in the front yard, its black and yellow frame standing out sharply against the white landscape. He had been asking for a snowmobile for 2 years. North Dakota winters were long, and many families in the area owned similar machines. After a brief instructional session from his father, he was allowed to take his first solo ride. His route was simple, a loop around their property that backed up to a neighboring farm. His parents watched from the porch as he made his first circle without incident. His smile was visible even through his new helmet visor. On his second loop, he decided to venture slightly farther, taking a path between the properties that local children often used. He accelerated to approximately 35 miles per hour. What he couldn't see, what no one had noticed, was a thin steel cable stretched across the path. A farmer had installed it just days earlier to prevent trespassers from using his private road. The cable struck him precisely at neck level. At the speed he was traveling, the impact was devastating. The 3/8-inch steel wire sliced into his throat just above his winter jacket collar. The force nearly decapitated him. The snowmobile continued forward while his body was thrown backward. His father, watching from a distance, saw the snowmobile continue without its rider. He ran toward the scene immediately. When he reached his son, the boy was still conscious. The carotid artery had been severed, and blood was pumping onto the white snow at an alarming rate. His eyes were open, looking directly at his father as he attempted to apply pressure to the wound. By the time emergency services arrived 12 minutes later, the boy had bled to death. The snowmobile, still running, was found 200 yards away. The Christmas morning collision. On Christmas morning, December 25, 2024, the small coastal city of Naga in Cebu, Philippines, was alive with celebration. A girl woke early, eager to collect the gifts waiting for her at her grandmother's house just 3 kilometers away. Her family was not wealthy, but Christmas was always special. She had been counting down the days. At 8:15 a.m., the girl climbed onto the family's motorcycle with her parents. With no car of their own, the motorcycle was their only means of transportation. She sat in front, protected between her father's arms as he steered. Her mother held on from behind. They wore no helmets, a common practice in rural Cebu despite local safety laws. The morning air was warm as they traveled down the national highway through Barangay Inobaran. Traffic was light on the holiday. Her father maintained a steady speed of about 40 kilometers per hour. The family was just 1 kilometer from their destination when disaster struck without warning. Approaching from the opposite direction was a white SUV. Behind the wheel was a 42-year-old driver who had spent the previous night at his mother's wake. He had been awake for nearly 30 hours straight. Fatigue had taken its toll. At approximately 8:23 a.m., the driver's head nodded. His eyes closed for just seconds, but it was enough. The SUV drifted across the center line directly into the path of the motorcycle. The father had no time to react. The impact was immediate and violent. The 2,700-kilogram SUV struck the 130-kilogram motorcycle head-on. The force threw both parents in opposite directions. But the girl, trapped between the vehicle and her father, bore the full impact. Her small body absorbed a force equivalent to falling from a 6-story building. The collision crushed her chest and abdomen, her ribs splintered, driving bone fragments into her lungs and heart. Internal bleeding was massive and immediate. First responders arrived within minutes, but she never regained consciousness. She was pronounced dead at the district hospital, still wearing the dress she had chosen for Christmas Day. The gift she was so excited to receive remained unwrapped at her grandmother's house. Her parents survived with serious injuries, forced to plan a funeral instead of continuing their holiday celebrations. The underwater Christmas tragedy. On December 26, 2004, the beaches of Phuket, Thailand, were filled with tourists enjoying the day after Christmas. Among them was a 46-year-old French pharmaceutical executive vacationing with his wife. The couple had arrived 3 days earlier, staying at the luxurious Amanpuri resort on Phuket's west coast. That morning, the executive decided to take an unusual tourist attraction, a camel ride along Kamala Beach. These camels, imported specifically for tourists, were a novelty in Thailand. At approximately 10:30 a.m., he mounted a 7-year-old dromedary guided by a local handler. His wife stayed behind at the resort pool, declining to join what she later described as his ridiculous adventure. At 10:58 a.m., witnesses noticed something strange. The water along the shoreline suddenly receded, pulling back nearly 100 meters from its normal position. Fish flopped helplessly on the exposed seabed. Local fishermen recognized the warning sign immediately and began shouting for people to run to higher ground. The executive, seated 2.5 meters above ground on the camel, was approximately 40 meters from the water's edge when the first wave hit. The tsunami approached not as the breaking wave depicted in films, but as a rapidly rising wall of water. It moved at approximately 30 miles per hour when it reached the shore. The wave struck with a force equivalent to a commercial jet hitting a concrete wall. The initial surge was estimated 8 meters high. He had no chance to dismount. Witnesses reported seeing both man and camel swept up in the torrent, the camel bellowing in panic as both were pulled into the churning water. The physics of the situation sealed his fate. The camel, weighing over 500 kilograms, acted as an anchor, dragging him beneath the surface. His legs were still strapped to the saddle. As the animal thrashed in the water, he was repeatedly submerged. Survival in such conditions was nearly impossible. The water contained a lethal mixture of sand, debris, and shattered glass. Each cubic meter weighed approximately 1,100 kilograms, preventing him from breaking free of the restraints or coming up for air. His body was found 3 days later, still tethered to the deceased camel 400 meters inland. The autopsy confirmed death by drowning, with severe trauma to the chest and abdomen. His was one of 5,395 lives claimed by the tsunami in Thailand alone. The fatal Yuletide Brawl. On Christmas night, December 25, 1895, the streets of St. Louis were quiet as families celebrated in their homes. But at a saloon, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. The establishment on the corner of 11th and Morgan was known for its rough clientele and late-night gambling. Among those present was a 31-year-old pimp and underworld figure. At approximately 10 p.m., he entered the saloon wearing his trademark Stetson hat and a diamond stick pin. He was well known in St. Louis's sporting district, an area filled with brothels and gambling houses. Also in the saloon that night was a 31-year-old levy hand with political connections. The two men knew each other casually. They had shared drinks before. But that night, the conversation turned to politics. The pimp was a staunch Democrat. The levy hand supported the Republicans. As the evening progressed and more whiskey was consumed, the disagreement became heated. At 11:30 p.m., the levy hand reportedly grabbed his Stetson off his head. "You've been talking too much about me," he said, holding the hat away. For the pimp, this was more than a minor insult. The Stetson was a symbol of his status. "I'll kill any man who touches my hat," he had once boasted. "Give me back my hat," he demanded, pulling a .44 caliber Smith & Wesson gun from his coat. The levy hand returned the hat, saying, "You've got your hat back. Now put away that gun." But the pimp had been publicly disrespected. In his world, such an offense demanded a response. "I'm going to kill you," he replied calmly. He aimed the gun at the levy hand's abdomen and pulled the trigger. The single shot pierced his stomach and exited through his back. The levy hand crumpled to the floor, clutching his midsection as blood spread across his white shirt. "Stack, you've shot me," he gasped. His final words were reportedly, "I don't want to die," but the wound was fatal. The bullet had torn through his stomach, liver, and intestines. Emergency surgery was attempted at City Hospital, but he died at 3 a.m. on December 26th. As he took his final breath, a uniquely American legend was born. The incident would be immortalized in the folk song Stackoly, later known as Staggerly, recorded hundreds of times over the next century. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.